Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell have been sharing the silver screen and a life together for many a year now. They're in conversation with Tracy Smith.
At 78, Goldie Hawn has just dropped a Hollywood bombshell, revealing she was once deeply seduced by a famous co-star during filming. The chemistry, the temptation, the moment she almost gave in, and why she never said a word until now. The actor remains unnamed, but the story is unforgettable. The shocking confession at 78. At 78 years old, Goldie Hawn still knows how to surprise the world. In a recent interview that quickly went viral, the Hollywood legend dropped a confession that left fans speechless. With her trademark charm and a reflective gaze, she revealed that one actor, early in her career, completely swept her off her feet. It wasn't Kurt Russell. It wasn't anyone the public had ever linked to her before. This was something deeper, a secret romance that never became public, never made headlines, and never fully unfolded. She was careful with her words, but the emotion was raw. She described it as an experience that changed her, not because it led to something permanent, but because it showed her something she hadn't felt in years. "Some people just get under your skin," she said softly, the corners of her mouth curving into a wistful smile. Fans, who had long idolized her and Kurt Russell as the golden couple of Hollywood, were stunned. The idea that Goldie had once nearly fallen for another man, especially so powerfully, seemed almost unthinkable. But Goldie was quick to clarify this all happened before Kurt, before the decades of devotion, family vacations, blended households, and deep, steady love. This wasn't betrayal. This was a memory, a story she had kept to herself for over 40 years, and now she was finally ready to tell it. What followed was not gossip, but a kind of emotional memoir filled with tension, desire, restraint, and the hard-earned wisdom of a woman who's lived 1,000 lifetimes under the spotlight. A set that was too hot to ignore. It happened during the filming of a major motion picture, a set buzzing with cameras, makeup teams, and the constant rhythm of Hollywood. Yet in the middle of all the lights and noise, a quiet tension was building between Goldie and her unnamed co-star. Crew members felt it. Fellow actors whispered about it. There was a heat between them that didn't need to be scripted. One insider recalled, "It was impossible to fake. You could feel it the moment they walked on set together. They weren't obvious, they didn't touch, but their eyes always found each other in a crowd. They laughed during breaks. They took long walks between scenes. People started to notice how often they disappeared together, never in a scandalous way, just private, close, and always on the edge of something more." Goldie would later admit that what happened between them wasn't physical, but it was real, real enough to shake her. The real performance wasn't always on screen, she confessed, her voice heavy with memory. Even now, decades later, the details of the film remain a closely guarded secret. The public may never know which movie, or which man, sparked this nearly legendary connection, but those who were there say it was unforgettable. Because on that set, for the first time in a long time, Goldie Hawn felt something she hadn't expected to feel again, like a woman being truly seen, the moment that changed everything. It wasn't planned, it wasn't part of the script, but during one emotionally charged scene, the unnamed actor leaned in close and whispered something in Goldie's ear, something unscripted, something just for her. She didn't reveal exactly what he said, but her face lit up as she recalled it. "It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it," she said. "I melted." The moment was so genuine, so vulnerable, that the director reportedly kept that take in the final cut. It was perfect, too perfect, because what the camera captured wasn't acting. It was real emotional electricity. That single moment, barely a few seconds on screen, marked a turning point. From then on, things shifted between them. Goldie said she started to feel drawn to him in a way that scared her. She wasn't a naive young actress. She knew the games of Hollywood, but this didn't feel like a game. It felt like the start of something dangerous and deeply honest. She remembered walking off set after that scene with her heart racing. She couldn't shake his words or his voice, and the way he looked at her, it lingered in her thoughts long after the cameras stopped rolling. It was, as she now describes, the start of a real emotional pull. And from that moment on, every scene they shared became more intense, more blurred between the real and the pretend. Goldie tried to maintain distance, but something had already changed, and there was no unfeeling it. She tried to resist, but couldn't. Goldie Hawn had always followed one golden rule in her career: never get romantically involved with a co-star while filming. It was messy, distracting, dangerous. But this time, the rule didn't stand a chance. The actor she shared the screen with wasn't just charming, he was intoxicating. Off camera, he had a way of looking at her that made her feel completely understood. When he listened, it was like no one else in the world existed. He made me feel seen, respected, and adored, she confessed. I hadn't felt that way since my early 20s. She tried to keep things professional. She showed up on time, stuck to her lines, stayed focused. But between scenes, she found herself wanting to be near him, craving the sound of his voice. She began calling him outside of work, at first for casual reasons, then just to hear him speak. I knew it was dangerous, she admitted, but I couldn't help it. Despite her best efforts, Goldie felt herself slipping into something emotional and possibly romantic. She didn't tell anyone. She was too smart for that. But her heart was changing, her guard was lowering, and the rules she had once lived by began to feel negotiable. Even though they never crossed a physical line, Goldie confessed that emotionally she was already gone. And she knew this wasn't just a passing crush. It was something she couldn't walk away from without leaving a piece of herself behind. The actor was already involved. But just as the emotional pull reached its peak, reality came crashing in. The actor, it turned out, wasn't fully available. At the time, he was rumored to be romantically linked to another famous actress, a woman Goldie respected. The realization hit hard. Suddenly, all the late-night calls, the quiet walks between trailers, the intensity, they took on a different shape, a shape Goldie didn't want to be part of. I didn't want to be a homewrecker, she said. I didn't want to be anyone's mistake. Still, the connection between them didn't disappear. If anything, it deepened, because now it lived in the shadows, unspoken, undeniable, and forbidden. They stopped meeting privately. They kept their distance on set. But every glance, every shared scene, was heavy with everything left unsaid. It was a connection that couldn't be denied, she admitted, but couldn't be pursued either. Goldie said that time in her life taught her something vital. Desire without boundaries is dangerous, but denying it doesn't make it disappear. She didn't act on it, but the ache of almost stayed with her long after the credits rolled. And sometimes, she said, the hardest heartbreaks are the ones no one ever sees. Friends noticed the shift in her. As the days on set rolled on, it wasn't just Goldie who felt the shift. Everyone around her began to notice something different. It started small, a lighter step, a deeper laugh, a glow that hadn't been there at the start of filming. One makeup artist who worked closely with her remembered it clearly. She came in humming, smiling, like a teenager in love, she said. It wasn't fake. You could feel the energy around her shift. Goldie was known for her positive spirit, but this was something else. A kind of emotional electricity that followed her everywhere, even when she wasn't speaking to the mystery actor. Even when they were at opposite ends of the studio, there was a current between them that never really dimmed. Her co-stars picked up on it too. The way her eyes darted across the room, the way her mood seemed tied to whether he was nearby. It wasn't scandalous, it wasn't overt, but it was undeniable. And yet, Goldie never crossed the line. There were no late-night trysts, no secret rendezvous. She kept everything buried deep, but that didn't stop it from bleeding into her performance. It was the first time I felt truly vulnerable on set, she told a close friend later. Vulnerable not because she was weak, but because something had cracked open in her. A part of her that hadn't been touched in years. She was emotionally exposed. She couldn't hide behind the role or the costume or the dialogue. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't performing. She was just feeling. The public had no idea. As the film wrapped and the press tour began, Goldie slipped seamlessly back into professional mode. the smiles, the interviews, the rehearsed answers, they were all back in place. But beneath the surface, the embers still glowed. The public had no idea. Every red carpet appearance, every late-night interview, every talk show segment showed the same bright, effervescent Goldie the world had always loved. But now, there was a new layer behind her eyes, a secret, a story she couldn't tell. The actor, equally polished, equally practiced, gave nothing away either. He smiled for the cameras, charmed the hosts, and deflected any questions about on-set chemistry with a laugh and a wink. Still, tabloids at the time caught wind of something. Whispers of off-screen sparks made the rounds in entertainment columns, but no one could pin anything down. There were no leaked photos, no dramatic headlines, just a quiet rumor floating in the Hollywood air. Years later, Goldie admitted, "We had to keep it buried beneath the surface. It wasn't a scandal, it was a connection. And those are harder to explain." She wasn't ashamed, but she was cautious. She knew that one wrong move, one headline taken out of context, could unravel everything she'd built. So she kept it hidden, protected it, let it live in her memory where it couldn't be misunderstood. But that didn't mean she forgot. Because some moments are too intimate for cameras, and some stories are never meant to be told in full, only felt. Was it love or just seduction? As time passed and the intensity of that experience began to settle into memory, Goldie Hawn found herself asking a painful question. Was it real love or just a perfectly timed seduction? She was older now, wiser, with enough emotional distance to look back without rose-colored glasses. And when she did, things looked a little different. "He knew what he was doing," she said during the interview. "He could win over anyone in the room." That part was true. The man was magnetic, charming, dangerously skilled at reading people. He could disarm you with a compliment and devastate you with a glance. He wasn't just an actor. He was a master of emotional manipulation. And Goldie had known it, even then. But she'd wanted to believe it was more, because when he looked at her, she felt seen. When he spoke, she listened like her life depended on it. And when he walked away at the end of the day, she felt the absence in her chest. That didn't feel like a game. Still, with time, she couldn't ignore the doubt. Maybe he had felt something, but maybe he had felt that way a dozen times before, with a dozen different women. Maybe he had played the part of the seducer so well, he started to believe it himself. And maybe she had been just one more scene in his long-running performance. But even if it was one-sided, even if she had fallen harder than he did, Goldie said she didn't regret it. "It reminded me I could still feel," she said, "that I wasn't just a fixture in this business. I was still a woman, still alive." And for her, that was enough. The actor's identity narrowed down. It didn't take long for fans to start connecting the dots. The moment Goldie's story aired, the internet lit up with speculation. Film buffs and gossip sites alike poured through her filmography, trying to figure out who the mystery man could be. Based on the timing, tone, and hints she dropped, a short list of names began circulating. Warren Beatty, Burt Reynolds, Steve McQueen. All of them had worked with Goldie during the early formative years of her career. All of them had reputations as irresistible, larger-than-life Hollywood heartthrobs. And all of them, at some point, had shared the screen and the spotlight with her. But Goldie stayed quiet, always teasing, never confirming. "He's still famous," she said with a knowing smile, "and still dangerous." That one line set off a wildfire of theories. Some claimed it had to be Beatty, Hollywood's legendary seducer. Others swore it was McQueen, known for his quiet intensity. A few argued for Reynolds, with whom Goldie had undeniable on-screen chemistry. But Goldie refused to name him, not out of fear, not out of shame, but because, in her words, it wouldn't help anyone to know. She believed in protecting the past, not exposing it, in honoring the connection for what it was, not reducing it to clickbait or scandal. Still, the mystery lingers. And in a town like Hollywood, sometimes the best stories are the ones never fully told. Comparing him to Kurt Russell. Looking back now with the clarity that only time can give, Goldie Hawn sees the contrast more clearly than ever. The man who once seduced her and the man who would later save her. They were nothing alike. The mystery actor was unpredictable, intense, the kind of man who walked into a room and changed the temperature. He was charming in a dangerous way, the kind of dangerous that pulls you in before you even know you're falling. Goldie described him as wild, magnetic, emotionally erratic. He made her feel alive, yes, but also unsteady. One look from him could send her soaring. One pause in a sentence could make her question everything. It was thrilling, overwhelming, and at times terrifying. He made me feel everything all at once. Excited, desired, overwhelmed, even scared, she said. But then came Kurt Russell, and with him, a completely different energy. With him, I felt safe, she said. Steady, real. Kurt didn't play games. He didn't need to chase or charm his way into her heart. He was simply there, constant, present, patient. The kind of man who showed up every day with the same quiet strength, never needing to dominate the room to make her feel special. Where the other man had left her guessing, Kurt gave her answers without words. He didn't need to prove anything. He just let her be, fully, freely, without condition. With Kurt, I never felt like I had to earn love, she said. He just gave it. Looking back, she admitted that if she had given in to that earlier temptation, if she had pursued something real with the mystery man, it probably would have ended in disaster. The connection had been powerful, but it was built on sand. All spark, no structure. It wasn't built to last. Sometimes what seduces you isn't what saves you, she said with a soft, knowing smile. And that lesson stayed with her. Because passion, she learned, is powerful. It's loud, intoxicating, impossible to ignore. But it doesn't always stay. It burns hot and then burns out. But partnership, that's different. Partnership is quiet. It's consistent. It endures. Goldie said that early experience, the secret seduction, the emotional near miss, taught her what to walk away from, and more importantly, what to walk toward. Kurt didn't sweep her off her feet. He grounded her. He didn't make her feel breathless. He made her feel at peace. And that, she realized, was the love that lasts. Not the storm, the shelter, not the chase, the arrival. And in Kurt, she didn't just find a partner. She found home, the almost affair. It was a moment suspended in silence. The film had wrapped, the lights dimmed, the crew gone for the night. Goldie stood at the threshold of his trailer, invited for dinner. Just the two of them. No cameras, no scripts, no pretending. She walked in. Candles flickered on the tiny table. A bottle of wine sat uncorked. He smiled, casual and confident. And for the first time since they started filming, the weight of restraint began to slip away. But something inside her pulled back. He poured her a glass. They talked. They laughed. Too much. Too easily. He brushed a lock of hair from her face. And that was the moment she felt the floor shift. The moment she realized, if this started now, it would never stop gently. It would destroy everything around it. She later told a friend, the movie, the illusion, and possibly her own peace of mind. So she stood up, mid-conversation, thanked him, and left. There was no fight, no dramatic exit, just a woman walking away from something she wanted, but knew she couldn't handle. Not then, not like that. That decision haunted her for weeks. She'd wake up thinking about the trailer, replay the night in her head, wonder what might have happened if she'd stayed 10 minutes longer. I still wonder what would have happened, she confessed years later, the memory still sharp, like a question with no right answer. But deep down, she knew. Walking away was the only way to keep what they had intact. Because once you cross a line, you can't uncross it. Hollywood's double standard. As the years passed and the experience faded into memory, Goldie began to see the situation in a new light. Not just through the lens of emotion, but through the cold reality of how women are judged in Hollywood. The actor she'd almost fallen for? He continued to thrive. More movies, more romances. His reputation as a ladies' man became part of his charm. But Goldie, she knew what would have happened if their emotional connection had become public. I couldn't have survived my career if I'd let myself fall, she said, eyes steady, not in the way he could. Because when women flirt, they're labeled unstable. When they fall in love on set, they're reckless. When they show desire, they're dangerous. But for men, it's all forgiven, even celebrated. And so she stayed silent, kept her truth hidden, swallowed her vulnerability like it was something to be ashamed of. But now, decades later, Goldie doesn't carry that shame anymore. She understands the price of survival, the cost of staying in the spotlight, and she knows that by saying no when it mattered most, she protected not just her career, but herself. Still, the sting remains, because she didn't walk away because it wasn't real. She walked away because she knew what the world would say if it ever found out. She kept her dignity, but lost a piece of something soft and beautiful, and that's the part she never got back. The mystery actor's career afterward. He moved on. They both did. The actor in question, still unnamed, still carefully protected, went on to have a long, celebrated career. He starred in hits, dated A-listers, lived the kind of bold, unapologetic Hollywood life that makes headlines and legends. But for all his public charm, there was one thing he never did again: work with Goldie. She admitted in the interview that they ran into each other a few times over the years, at premieres, award shows, industry parties, always civil, always polite. But something lingered beneath the surface. He looked at me once, she recalled, and it was like we shared a secret no one else could touch. They never spoke about what happened, never acknowledged the feelings, the tension, the trailer dinner that never went too far. And maybe that was for the best, because what they shared existed in a strange in-between space, too powerful to ignore, too complicated to pursue, a connection without a name. She wondered sometimes what he remembered, whether it stayed with him the way it stayed with her, whether he ever told anyone. But she never asked. She never needed to. Some stories don't need closure, just silence. And in that silence lived the echo of what might have been. Why she spoke now. For decades, the story stayed locked away. Goldie Hawn didn't write about it in memoirs. She didn't hint at it on talk shows. She never let it slip in late-night interviews or memoir-friendly confessions. It wasn't a tabloid scandal. It wasn't a career-defining headline. It was hers. A secret memory tucked away in the back of her mind. A chapter written in invisible ink. But now, at 78, something shifted. Goldie said it wasn't one moment, but a series of quiet realization. The sense that time was passing faster. That legacy matters more than perception. That stories untold begin to feel like ghosts, haunting the soul with their silence. And so, in an unguarded moment during a conversation about love, loss, and the things that shape us, she let the truth slip through the door. "I just wanted to tell the truth behind the curtain," she said gently. Her voice wasn't bitter. It wasn't seeking revenge or validation. It was tender, like a woman dusting off an old photograph, finally ready to hold it up to the light. She wasn't trying to spark gossip. She wasn't naming names. In fact, she was careful not to, because it wasn't about him. It was about her. About acknowledging something real that had shaped her quietly, deeply, and privately for years. She admitted she now feels safer than ever, more grounded, less afraid of how the world might react. The pressure to be America's sweetheart, the charming blonde with the easy laugh, had finally loosened its grip. Now, she said, her focus is legacy, not the kind built in box office numbers or magazine covers, but the kind built on truth, on permission, on giving women, especially those in the spotlight, room to feel and survive and speak. Because for too long, women in Hollywood have been taught to stay quiet, taught to suppress, to be grateful, polite, composed, to never admit weakness or vulnerability or desire. But Goldie was done with that. Seduction doesn't have to end in surrender, she said with a small, knowing smile. Sometimes it just reminds you that you're still alive. She didn't tell the story to expose anyone. She told it to reclaim it, to take something that had once filled her with confusion and longing and turn it into something else, a symbol of strength. To speak it aloud was to look that younger version of herself in the eye and say, "You were brave. You felt deeply, you walked away, and you carried it with grace. It wasn't about regret, it was about release. Because some stories don't need to be rewritten or erased. They just need to be spoken, gently, truthfully, and at the right time. And in finally giving that chapter a voice, Goldie set it free. And in doing so, she set a piece of herself free too. Will she ever reveal his name? The final question came near the end of the interview. The one everyone wanted answered. The one no one really expected her to say aloud. Who was he? Goldie paused. She smiled, softly but knowingly. And then she said, "It wouldn't help anyone to know, but if he's listening, he knows it was him." That single sentence sparked a firestorm online. Theories exploded, names resurfaced, old interviews were rewatched, timelines re-examined, eyes scanned for hidden clues. But Goldie didn't budge. The identity of the man who once made her question everything remains a mystery. And maybe that's the point. There's power in mystery, she later said. Power in keeping one thing for yourself. Because naming him would make it smaller. It would reduce it to scandal. And this wasn't scandal. It was a memory, a near love story, a lesson in control, in vulnerability, in walking away from what burns. So the mystery endures, like the seduction itself, unfinished, unspoken, just out of reach. She may never reveal his name, but the emotional truth is now out in the open. For Goldie, it wasn't about scandal. It was about remembering what it meant to feel, to resist, and to survive. And in telling her story, she gave voice to every almost love that never made it to light.